Hello and welcome to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast on today, Friday, April 18th. We've got a good show for you today. We are going to preview some of the upcoming spring games for this weekend, some key storylines to follow across the country, and a few different programs. Also going to preview some of the West Coast Big Ten teams today. Going to talk a little bit about Washington, talk a little bit about Oregon, get into their seasons, kind of go position by position as I've been doing, break them down. We're also then going to talk a little bit about Lee Corso, his retirement. Make sure you stick around for that. It's going to be a good show, though. We're going to have a lot of fun today. And before I get into anything, though, I want to remind everyone to please like and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate your support. We thrive on it. And we would love to hear from you, whether it's a quick comment, a thoughtful question, any insights that you have, any opinion that you have to share that you need to get out. We would love to hear it. We want to make this show as exciting, as interactive as possible. One way to be interactive in the show is to use the super chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. It guarantees that it gets on the air, gets read, and we just love your comments. We love your support. It helps us keep the lights on and keep bringing you more of the sports content that you love. If you don't want to use super chat, you can also go to gsmcsport.net to tip, donate, leave a comment or question there. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the spring games this weekend. So there were a few last weekend. Georgia was last weekend. Texas was last weekend. A couple other programs. Tennessee was last weekend. But this weekend is going to be another big weekend for spring games. One school that I'm really looking at is Colorado. Their game is going to be tomorrow. Obviously, this is going to be kind of a transition year for the Buffaloes after losing quarterback Shedeur Sanders, losing Travis Hunter. Those are going to be the two main departures for Colorado. Also losing Jimmy Horn at wide receiver, a couple other guys. But this is going to be a new era for Colorado. We're not really sure what they look like without Shedeur Sanders or Travis Hunter. Not really sure kind of what they look like or what Deion looks like even. He has never not coached his son in college. Shiloh's also going to be gone. I think it's going to be kind of an adjustment for him, honestly. I wonder if it's really going to impact Deion more so than Shedeur or Travis Hunter or the rest of the team. I could see this being something where it kind of more affects Deion, just how he kind of operates as a coach. It's going to be a little bit different just without his sons there in that program with him. That's going to be really interesting for me to watch. I think that's going to be the big storyline here is just kind of how he interacts, how he still leads his team. This has really been a time for grabbing new talent, kind of restocking and maintaining that momentum. That's really been what Deion's kind of been pushing there at Colorado. Had a really strong recruiting class in 2025. Brought in Julian Lewis, brought in London Merritt, who was a big-time DN pickup from them from Florida. Also brought in Quentin Gibson, Christian Hudson, a couple other ESPN 300 guys. So they have multiple ESPN 300 recruits. Julian Lewis is obviously going to be the headliner here. The quarterback competition, that's going to be another big storyline to follow. Will it be Julian Lewis? He's really kind of impressed during spring this season, showcased his arm strength, showcased his accuracy during all these practices in the spring, kind of just indicating that, he's got a promising future. This is a guy that will be the quarterback of the future for Colorado. Even if it's not this year in 2025, Julian Lewis will be the guy there at one point. But that's going to be a big thing here is, will it be Caden Salter? Will it be Julian Lewis to start off? We're not really sure yet. That's going to be the big point of emphasis here I'm looking at. D-line should also be a strength here. Kind of going to showcase some of those guys, Jaheim Otis, Anquan Barnes, Amari McNeil, they're kind of all projected to be in the top of the Big 12, just across categories. There's a couple different edge rushers there. There's a lot of depth. The one thing I want to key in on, though, for this week is their skill positions. Who's going to replace those guys? They didn't have a lot returning at wide receiver, at running back. So I think that's going to be one of the big things to watch in their spring game this weekend, is kind of who's manning those positions, who's in the backfield. Will it be Caden Salter? Will it be Juju Lewis running out with the first team? I think those are all going to be kind of things to watch. And also linebacker, I think, is an interesting point of emphasis for Colorado. Vontae Bentley's going to be gone, as well as Nikai Hill Green. So those are two big leaders, veteran presences on the defensive side of the ball that are going to have to be replaced. How Colorado does that, I think, is going to be kind of interesting to watch. And that's one of the things I'm looking out for in their spring game this weekend. Looking at Michigan, obviously all eyes are going to be on quarterback here at Michigan. Everyone wants to see how Bryce Underwood's going to look. Number 1 rated quarterback, number 1 overall prospect in 2025. He's the future of Michigan. Pretty much kind of what they do rests on Bryce Underwood. I don't know if he'll really play that much this year. I think that's going to be kind of interesting just to see how much he actually plays. Will he be starting from week 1? I'm kind of leaning towards he won't be starting week 1. I don't know, though. That's really honestly a toss-up. But how he fares in the spring game, I think, will also kind of play a factor in that decision of whether he's going to start week 1 or maybe Mikey Keaton starts for 3 or 4 weeks and then eventually hands over the reins to Bryce Underwood. I think that's going to be kind of something to watch here at Michigan. So obviously, Michigan spring game this weekend, all eyes are on the quarterbacks. I think Bryce Underwood's performance this weekend is more important than Mikey Keaton's, just in terms of how ready he is for the start of the season. That's going to be something to watch at Michigan. Texas A&M also is going to have their spring game this weekend. They had an interesting season last year, finished 8-5, but they were pretty highly ranked for a good chunk of the season. Had a lot of talent, but they are going to lose some guys this year. They're going to lose Shamar Stewart, who honestly wasn't great in college. Nick Scourton, though, he was the other defensive end. He was a lot more productive throughout his college career in College Station. Going to lose both those guys. So I think D-line, kind of just what they do there, that's going to be interesting to see who kind of rotates in. They also brought a couple transfers in, especially at wide receiver. Brought Casey Concepcion in. That's going to be a big name there. TJ Searcy on the defensive side of the ball at DN. Julian Humphrey at cornerback. Those are going to be guys that I'm really looking at for this game, kind of how they're integrated into the Texas A&M system, into that team. I think it's going to be interesting. Also, with Colin Klein running the offense, former Kansas State offensive coordinator, former Heisman finalist at Kansas State, actually had a great season his last year at Kansas State. I still remember that, but new offensive coordinator there, going to have a new system. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how he implements that. I wonder who's going to start at quarterback here. They do have Marcel Reed coming back. Connor Wigman's also coming back off of a major injury. So which one of those two guys? I think that's kind of what the competition is between right now. Jalen Henderson's also kind of in name. He's in the competition right now. I really think it's more Connor Wigman, Marcel Reed that are really fighting for that job, that position right now. Obviously recruited great again, had the number 9 high school recruiting class in the country, number 10 portal class. Also, they're number 6 nationally in returning production, which I think is a really interesting stat, more important than people think. Just having those guys coming back, having the continuity, that could make Texas A&M a lot scarier this upcoming season. The thing to watch for them, though, is going to be just defensive consistency. Obviously, we're not going to see that in the spring game. there's really no defense played in spring games. Let's be honest. I mean, nobody. You're not tackling. You're not going full go. Your defense isn't really going to play that much. It's more of an offensive showcase, but still going to be keying in on those guys, kind of how they're moving throughout the positions. If they're just kind of moving efficiently, playing smart, that's going to be a big thing with Texas A&M. Kind of they had a lot of miscues in their secondary last year. That's going to be a big thing, just kind of reducing big plays, having those communication skills, and just not giving up massive plays of 20-plus yards in terms of gain. That's going to be a big thing for Texas A&M. South Carolina also is going to have their spring game. That one's actually tonight, Friday night. It's at like 7:30 Eastern time, something like that. But they're going to be another team that I'm looking at. We're 9-4 last season. Shane Beamer had a 9-win season at South Carolina. That's only been matched by Steve Spurrier in the past 40 years. So pretty impressive for Shane Beamer. I think this is going to be a team. I'm really high on South Carolina this season, and I like Lenore Sellers a lot. Dylan Stewart, obviously going to be another guy where he was a 5-star phenom, had a really strong true freshman year last year, will be a sophomore this season, going to be kind of the cornerstone of that defense. I think he's going to step up and play phenomenal. One of the things to look at here is going to be just position battles. Defensive front seven's kind of all in transition, losing Kyle Kennard to the draft. Obviously, Stewart does return, but a couple other guys are leaving. So they brought in a bunch of transfers, though. Brought in Jalen Brown from Missouri, Justin Okoronkwo from Bama, Sean Murphy, Florida State. There's a couple different guys. It's going to be a dogfight to see who actually starts there opposite Dylan Stewart. But there's going to be a bunch of guys that are going to rotate in. I think that's going to be a position to watch for during this spring game this weekend, is kind of who's playing with that number one defense, that number one D-line, who's rotating in there. I think it's going to be kind of interesting. That's going to be a spot to look for South Carolina this weekend. Running back is also going to be a big position here. Rocket Sanders, he's gone. He is departing, so they're going to need a new running back. And Rocket had a really strong season last year. There's a couple different guys vying for that role right now, vying for carries. And that's going to be another position to see who's lining up next to Lenore Sellers in the backfield with the first-team offense. I think that's going to be kind of interesting. Probably going to be a backfield by committee, but still not really sure who's going to be the at least 1A back. You know, it could be a 1A, 1B type scenario, but still not sure who's going to be that, first guy to trot out on the field with the first-team offense there. So we are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to preview the Washington Huskies, talk about their upcoming season, expectations, position breakdowns. So we're going to get into all that shortly, and we'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Network. Just talked a little bit about some of the spring games coming up from this upcoming weekend, got into some of the previews there. Next, I want to talk a little bit about Washington, but first, before we do that, I just want to remind everyone that we love hearing from you during the show, whether it's a quick comment, thoughtful question, just an opinion that you have to get out, you have to share. We want to hear it. An easy way to do that is you can use the Super Chat feature. So to do that, just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, gets viewed, and it's also just a great way to support our channel. We rely on your support to help us keep the lights on, keep bringing you the sports content that you love, that we love. We're so grateful for your support, and we love having you as a part of our community here at GSMC. So we're going to talk a little bit about the West Coast Big Ten teams now, at least two of them. So I want to talk a little bit about Washington first right now. Washington did not have a great 2024 season, kind of struggled adjusting to the Big Ten, really had a lot of departures after Kalen DeBoer left, after that national championship run in 2023, lost Michael Penix, lost their receivers, Ramadunze, Jalen McMillan. There's a couple guys. There was a lot of talent, and then once DeBoer left as well, there was kind of mass exodus of transfers. So last year was kind of a rebuilding year, retooling, tough year for Washington. Head coach Jedd Fisch was brought in from Arizona. I actually really like Jedd Fisch. I think he's a solid coach. But this was a tough year for Washington. Not a super strong roster. Kind of got depleted, like I said, after that season. But so, quarterback-wise, they brought in Will Rogers last year from Mississippi State. He was a 4-year starter at Mississippi State. Super productive there. He kind of was what you'd expect. You know, he completed 70% of his passes. That was kind of, he's always been a really high completion percentage guy. But as the season went on, kind of threw more interceptions, struggled against teams like Iowa, Indiana, especially as the line kind of started to break down. Didn't have as much time. The weapons around him weren't as strong. So Will Rogers, he kind of really had a tough year at the end, but he's going to be gone. He's out of eligibility. In steps Damon Williams full-time. Now, Damon Williams, this is an exciting quarterback. He kind of took over at the end of the season last year, played a few games for Washington, and really showed kind of his flashes of what he can do. This is a kid with elite athletic ability, true dual-threat quarterback. Every time he scrambles is kind of a worry for opposing defenses. He's really electric, exciting quarterback, but still has to grow, especially as a passer. Will be a true sophomore, so still young, still learning. Didn't play too much last year, got enough experience, but this is obviously still going to be a young quarterback that's going to make mistakes. But I think when everything is clicking for Damon Williams, he's going to be a really fun quarterback to watch, and this could be a fun Washington offense to watch, even though talent-wise they may not be top tier, at least in the Big Ten right now. They also brought in Kai Horton from Tulane. That's probably going to be the main backup to Damon Williams. Pretty experienced quarterback there, but he's kind of still in the competition in name, I guess. But this is going to be Damon Williams' offense at Washington. This is his show. So then Jonah Coleman, it looks like, is going to be the main running back. Had a really strong 2024 season. Had 1,050 rushing yards, averaged like 5.5 yards per carry. Had 10 touchdowns. Also had 23 catches, 177 receiving yards. So this is going to be a kid that had a strong year last year. They didn't really bring in anyone to supplant his spot. So Jonah Coleman will be the main guy here. And then Adam Muhammad is pretty much solidified as his backup. He had 42 carries last year, only less than 200 yards, but in those carries kind of solidified himself as the second guy in Washington. Pro Football Focus is really high on Jonah Coleman in particular. They had him ranked as their number 4 returning running back. I don't know if he's that high, but that's still a really good sign of an indicator of his talent level of what he can do for the Husky offense. I think Jonah Coleman is going to be a guy that Washington's going to rely on. I guess Washington's play-by-play commentator, he was calling Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, and Adam Muhammad Run DMC. I thought that was pretty funny. I like that throwback there. Pass catching wise, though, for wide receivers, they are going to lose their number 1 wideout. But Denzel Boston, he's going to be back. He had a really strong year as their wideout 2 last season. 63 catches, 830 yards, 9 touchdowns. He was kind of their number 2 receiver behind Giles Jackson all year. Should step up kind of into that main role as that X wide receiver. There's a couple other names here that are going to be in contention. Omari Evans, he's kind of the biggest addition right now. Had a decent year at Penn State. I wouldn't put too much stock in Penn State receivers right now personally, but that's kind of my opinion. Penn State, though, or Omari Evans, though, 400 receiving yards last season, 5 touchdowns, so still had a decent chunk of production for Penn State. Could be a guy that potentially makes a jump up at Washington with a little more opportunities in the pass game there. Tight end wise, Keleki Latu, he's probably going to be the main guy. Kind of solidified himself last season, had 40 catches, almost 400 receiving yards. Really showcased that he's a reliable option there. But this is going to be a unit that's unproven for the most part, and there's going to be guys that are going to have to step up here if Washington wants to have a really solid chance at having a successful season. I think wide receiver tight end is going to be a spot where they're going to need to have guys step up and probably outperform expectations a little bit there, I think. Offensive line, last season, they really faced challenges, had a lot of injuries, didn't have a lot of depth, so they were pretty inconsistent throughout the year. Had some games where they looked like really strong, like world beaters, especially considering their 2023 roster. That offensive line was stacked, probably was a top 3 offensive line in the country that season. So the inconsistency really showed in 2024 after injuries, after the departures of some of those guys from that other roster. But there's a lot of new opportunities now. There's a couple guys that have left, 4 or 5 of their offensive linemen left, but they also have guys that are emerging, such as Landon Hatchett, Maximus McCree, Carver Willis. They're all kind of guys that could be potential starters. They're fresh faces, bring a little bit of new energy, new swag, different kind of skill sets to the line. Also, they changed offensive line coaches, brought in Michael Switzer, and that should potentially help these guys' development, improve the play overall, the quality of the offensive line play. They do return 3 starters, 2-ish starters. Swane Fasolo, he's going to be their left tackle. He's returning. Drew Azapardi, he's returning as well at right tackle. I already said Maximus McCree, but he's also a returner. Could be a potential guy to start there. But at least 2 returning starters. This is going to be a spot, though, where it's going to be up in the air, kind of, and that is a line, a room where Washington really needs some improvement there. D-line, it's also kind of it was last year, especially was a transitional year. Had some holdovers from the Kalen DeBoer era. Also brought in a couple transfer guys, but they didn't really have a lot of top-end talent. Were competitive at times, but didn't really consistently challenge offensive lines, didn't really consistently rush the passer. Had 20 sacks, though, over 12 games, so a little bit over a sack and a half a game. Also had 43 tackles for loss just in total as a team. Not a whole lot, but a decent number. Javen Parker, this is going to be one guy to look at for this upcoming season. He only played 4 games last year, had 10 total tackles, but he did tear his Achilles against Rutgers, so that's going to be the big thing to look for here is just how he will rehab from that injury, how he will come back. Will he be 100% after that tear? Achilles is a really rough injury to kind of go through. Another guy, though, is Alinius Davis. He played all 11 games last year. Didn't have super strong numbers. Only had 2 tackles for loss. Only had a sack. But the fact that he appeared in all 11 games as a true freshman, that really kind of showcased his potential. This could be a guy that's going to leap into a bigger role this season, just with more opportunities, more available playing time at Washington. This is going to be a challenging unit, though. There's not a ton of depth. There's not a ton of experience on the line right now. This really going to be a unit that's going to rely on underclassmen like Davis to kind of elevate that room, step into that role, and just develop a little more. Development's really going to be crucial here. Will these young guys be able to step up? And this could also be a spot where there could potentially be some kind of transfer portal addition on the D-line just to kind of bolster that room a little bit. Schedule-wise, they've got some tough games. Washington has to play Ohio State. That game is at home, though. However, they do have to go to Michigan. I think, depending on how Michigan's season's going, that could be a tough game. Have Illinois at home. Illinois, as a team, I'm pretty high on this season. They have to play at Wisconsin. I don't think Wisconsin's going to be the strongest program this year, but playing at Madison is going to be a tough place for them to go and have to play at. And then they have Oregon, but Oregon is at home. I believe that's the last weekend of the season. That's rivalry week. But just right there, those are 5 games that are very easily losses for Washington, and that's not counting any of their other matchups against some of the other Big Ten teams that are kind of in that middle of the pack where it seems like most of those games are kind of a toss-up on a week-to-week basis. So this is going to be a Washington team I think is probably going to hover around 500 again. Could be a little bit over. I think a 75, 8-4 kind of year is possible, but it's going to be a tough season for the Huskies, I think, in the Big Ten. So we're going to take our second break of the show, and when we come back, we're going to stick on the West Coast, and we're going to preview a little bit of the Oregon Ducks and their upcoming season. So stick with us, and we'll be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Just previewed a little bit of the Washington Huskies, their upcoming season. We're going to stick on the West Coast and talk a little bit about the number 1 seed in this last season's college football playoff, the Oregon Ducks. So obviously Oregon had a really strong season last year, went undefeated throughout the regular season, won the Big Ten championship in their first year in the Big Ten, beat Penn State in that game. kind of had a rough draw in the college football playoff, had a bye week 1, then had to play the winner of Ohio State-Tennessee, which was Ohio State. Weren't able to beat Ohio State for a second time in the season. But this is going to be a team, again, that I think is going to be a college football playoff contender. They're not going to have as much talent returning, but still a lot of guys on this roster that I think are going to be really solid. This is going to be another really strong Ducks team. So quarterback-wise, it's going to be Dante Moore's time now. So Dante Moore was a 5-star recruit, had a really interesting high school kind of recruiting situation, committed to about 3 different schools, but that's besides the point though. Went to UCLA as a freshman, played a good chunk of their games, started I believe 5 or 6 games as a true freshman. Then he decided to transfer to Oregon last season. So they brought in Dante Moore as well as Dylan Gabriel. Dante Moore sat behind Dylan Gabriel for a year. He should be the guy that's going to take over. In theory, Austin Novosad, he's still in the race at quarterback. It's still technically an open competition, and Eugene, I think that's really more so in name than anything else. I think this is Dante Moore's team. He's going to take over. I'm really interested to see his development and how much sitting out last season, how much that helped him, if it did help at all, because this was a guy that I think was probably one of the top 2 or 3 most talented quarterbacks in that 2023 class, which obviously was a really strong recruiting class. But I'm really curious to see his development, what he can do at Oregon. I think there's a lot more talent around him than at UCLA, and I think you could have a really strong season from Dante Moore. Running back wise, he is going to lose their leading rusher from last year, Jordan James. Jordan James had over 1,200 rushing yards, but they bring in Mekhi Hughes from Tulane. This kid should be their running back 1, has over 2,800 rushing yards from the past 2 seasons, had about 1,400 last year, had about 1,350 in 2023, so proven production. He also caught 19 passes last year, kind of highlighting a little bit of his dual threat ability. Noah Whittington, he's returning, should be the running back 2 again. Had 540 rushing yards last season, so this can be a kid that he should step back into that role. This is still going to be a really strong running back room for Oregon. I'm excited to watch Mekhi Hughes this year. Just that jump up in quality of teammates, I think that's going to be the biggest thing for Mekhi Hughes, getting that Oregon offensive line in front of him compared to some of the guys at Tulane. Not that Tulane's a bad program whatsoever, but some of the guys up front at Oregon, probably a little bit stronger than some of the guys at Tulane. I'm curious to see what he does behind that offensive line at Oregon. I think that could be really fun to watch. Pass catching wise, they're going to lose a decent chunk here. So they're losing Tez Johnson, who heart and soul of that wide receiver room past couple years. Bo Nix's adopted brother, which I never knew about until I was watching the Combine. And they were like, oh yeah, Tez Johnson, brother of Bo Nix. And I was like, what? That's crazy. But interesting story there. Tez Johnson, though, going to be a really good player in the NFL, I think. Really strong career at Oregon. They're going to lose him. They're going to lose their tight end, Terrence Ferguson. Also going to lose wide receiver Trayshawn Holder. So they're losing a lot of production here in the wide receiver tight end room. Evan Stewart, he's going to return. Former 5-star, transferred to Oregon last season after being at Texas A&M. Had a really strong season. I believe was their second leading pass catcher last year. He's going to be the number 1 wideout, take over that X role. Z on the other outside receiver is going to be kind of interesting. It's really going to be a toss-up between Jeremiah McClellan, Malik Benson. Both of them are kind of in contention. I think either one could play. They're both going to play. Either one could start, though. And it looks like the slot is going to be true freshman, number 1 wide receiver in the country, DeCorian Moore. I'm really excited to see him play in college. This kid is his top 5 overall prospect, was the number 1 receiver in the class, and a really strong receiver recruiting class. I'm excited to see him, how he plays with Evan Stewart. Going to be a really exciting player to watch. I think he could have a similar impact at Oregon that Jeremiah Smith did for Ohio State last season. I don't know if it'll be that much of an impact, but DeCorey Moore, I think he's still going to have a really, really strong freshman season for Oregon. He's going to play a lot. I don't know if he's a 1,000-yard receiver guy as a freshman, but I think he's probably over 500 receiving yards this upcoming season. Don't quote me on that, though. I could be way off there. Tight end room, a little more in flux. They have 2 guys. Kenyon Sadiq, probably going to be the starter there. Jamari Johnson, he should also mix in. That might be a place where they add somebody in the portal, just because they don't have a ton of depth at tight end right now. That's going to be a room that they might look at to try to add to. In the trenches, offensive line, going to be kind of interesting. They really have 3 set starters pretty much. Left tackle, it looks like it's going to be Nevada transfer Isaiah World. Played all games last year at left tackle for Nevada. Had a really strong season, all-conference selection. Left guard, looks like it's going to be USC transfer Emmanuel Pregnon. He started all 13 games for them last year. And then at center, it's going to be Yapani Laulu. Normally, I'm really good with those names. They have been giving me issues the past week or so. Yapani Laulu, he's going to start at center. Started all 2024 last year. Will be, again, the starter at center. Right tackle, right guard, they're a little bit more of a toss-up. There's going to be a couple different guys. Right tackle's really going to be between Alex Harkey, Janoris Wilson. Those are the 2 guys there. Defensive line, Mateo Uagalele, that's the headliner. DJ's younger brother. I already talked about him in my top 5 edge rushers to look for, but that's going to be a kid that I think he's going to be the anchor of this Oregon defense. He's going to be a really strong player. Had about 10 sacks last year. I could see a similar performance, if not better, this upcoming season. A couple different guys then. Bear Alexander is probably going to be their nose tackle. Omari Washington, Aiden Breland, they're probably going to mix in at that other D-tackle spot. Linebacker-wise, they got Bryce Bochers back and got another year of eligibility from the NCAA. This is huge for Oregon. Last year, played in all 14 games. He had 13 starts at inside linebacker. Won the Burlsworth Award, which is most outstanding player who began their career as a walk-on. I thought that was kind of cool. I never heard of that award before. But he was the first Oregon guy to win it, too. But 94 tackles last season, 50 solo tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Really graded strongly by Pro Football Focus across the board. I think he was 4th in overall grade in linebackers across the country. That's going to be the main guy there to look for. Secondary is going to be kind of an interesting spot for them. Brandon Johnson, he's leaving at safety. There's going to be a couple different guys that are kind of in the mix there. Dalen Austin, as well as Jalen Kennedy he was a transfer in from Ole Miss. And then Trey McNutt, he's a 5-star coming in, I believe from Ohio actually, but he's a safety to watch at Oregon there, could mix in that role. Schedule-wise, I think Oregon actually has a pretty solid schedule for this upcoming season to make another run. They have Oklahoma State at home in the first week or 2 of the season. I thought that was kind of an interesting matchup. They should be fine against Oklahoma State, but I just thought it was interesting more so that they're playing Oklahoma State. The big matchup I'm looking at for Oregon this season is going to be September 27th. They have to go to Happy Valley, play at Penn State in a rematch of that Big Ten championship game. they kind of dominated that game in the first half. Penn State came back, made it pretty close, but I'm really curious to see how they'll fare having to go on the road, play in one of the toughest stadiums in the country. How will they react, especially, well, at least in September, the weather shouldn't be too bad in Pennsylvania, but you never know. Could be rain, snow, sleet, anything, honestly, but that's going to be the big matchup I'm looking at for Oregon this season. They're also going to play Indiana at home. I'm not too concerned about that game for them, but it could be a trap kind of game, especially that's coming 2 weeks after Penn State. Just kind of depends on what happens with that game. Then their only other matchup where I was like, they might kind of have issues is they have to play at Iowa November 8th. I don't know how Iowa's going to be this year, but I think Iowa's just kind of a tough place to play traditionally. And they're a really interesting opponent, especially for Oregon, kind of stylistic clashes. I think that's going to be a game where I don't think Oregon loses, but I think they may have struggles in that particular matchup this upcoming season. However, I think probably the floor for this team is 9-3. They don't have to play Ohio State, don't have to play Michigan. Penn State's really going to be their toughest matchup here. I think this is a 9-3 team at minimum. Definitely going to be in contention again this upcoming season. Going to be a team we're going to have to look out for the college football playoff for a potential national championship. So we're going to take another short break here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and we will be back right away. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the games for this upcoming season across the country that I'm kind of keeping an eye on, games I think could be fun to look at. So we're going to do that when we come back, but we will see you shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Just previewed a little bit about some of the West Coast Big Ten teams, talked a little Washington, talked a little Oregon. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the top games that I kind of looked at and circled on the schedule for this season. I went down through pretty much all the games for each week and kind of just looked at some of the ones that I think are going to be really good games, just interesting matchups, potential ramifications for the playoff, for just the bracket, for conference championships. There's a couple of ones that I think are really interesting. Week 1, obviously, the big matchup here is going to be Texas-Ohio State. I honestly think they'll probably go into the season ranked 1 and 2. I would be a little bit surprised if they're not, especially ESPN, some of the polls, the media guys, they kind of like to bump up those rankings when they know teams are playing each other. So I think if they're ranked 1 and 2, week 1, that's a pretty exciting matchup. Texas, though, they have to go to Columbus, play at Ohio State. This is going to be a tough matchup. I think more so for Ohio State, honestly. Ohio State, they're losing a lot of guys. They're losing a ton on defense. Jack Sawyer, Tumalau, they're both gone. Losing Denzel Burke. Caleb Downs does return. Sonny Styles returns. A couple other guys on defense. And then obviously on offense, the big thing here is you're losing your quarterback and you're losing your top 2 running backs. So that's going to be a matchup of pretty much first-time starters. Obviously, Arsh started a couple games this past season, was playing throughout the season for Texas. So he's got a little more experience than whoever's going to end up starting for Ohio State, whether it be Julian Sand or Lincoln Keenholz. Either guy, Arch does have a little bit more experience than both of those guys. I think, honestly, I think Texas could have a really decent chance to win this game. Ohio State, especially in the past few years, they've kind of had a couple games at home, especially where they've slipped up early in the season, especially. They were able to beat Notre Dame, but, if you go back to 3 or 4 years ago, they had Oregon at home week 2 or 3 of the season, lost that matchup. I think this could be a game where Texas has a couple more guys that are returning, has stronger production returning, especially week 1. Ohio State kind of traditionally throughout September doesn't have the toughest schedule in the country. This could be a game where Ohio State may not be as prepared, but could be completely opposite. Ohio State could come out and dominate this game. They are going to return their wide receivers. I think that's going to be the biggest thing here is returning Jeremiah Smith, returning Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis stepping in, Mylan Graham stepping in. This is still going to be a really, really strong pass-catching group for Ohio State. And if they're able to get the ball to those guys early, it could be a matchup where Ohio State could potentially pull it out. But that's going to be a really fun game to watch week 1. Then there were 2 weeks where I really kind of keyed in on and circled because there are about 5 or 6 games in each weekend where I was like, whoa, this is going to be a fun weekend. So week 5, the week of September 27th, I think this is going to be a really, really fun weekend for college football. So in the ACC, you have Duke playing at Syracuse. I think that's going to be a game where both of those teams had really strong years last year. Syracuse won 10 games, Duke won 9, and will they kind of jump up into that upper echelon of ACC contenders? I think Duke may be a little more likely to do that, just with the addition of Darian Mensah at quarterback. Syracuse is going to lose Trevor Pena. They're going to lose Kyle McCord. So could be kind of a tough season, but I think this could be a matchup where whoever wins that game is kind of going to jump into that upper echelon of ACC contenders, really solidify their place as potentially being in the ACC championship hunt. BYU Colorado is also that weekend. BYU has to go play at Colorado. Obviously, Colorado's kind of been rebuilding, but BYU played them twice last year, had a really close game in the regular season, beat them then kind of beat them down in the Alamo Bowl, actually. Pretty much embarrassed Colorado in that game. Will Colorado be coming back with a vengeance? I think that's going to be a fun one to watch. And then the games that are really consequential, week 5, Oregon has to go to Penn State. I kind of talked about that game earlier in the show. Alabama also has to go to Athens to play Georgia. And I think if Bama kind of starts out really strong, that could potentially be a top 5, definitely probably a top 10 matchup, and be a game with serious ramifications in the SEC. LSU also has to go play at Ole Miss. Those games have been really, really competitive, really fun to watch the past 2 seasons. Last year, Ole Miss probably should have pulled it out at Baton Rouge. We're pretty much leading that entire game up until right at the end. But LSU is going to come to Oxford, play Ole Miss next season on that weekend. That's going to be a good one as well. And then to close out week 5, there's going to be Notre Dame at Arkansas, which Notre Dame you don't really see play that many SEC teams, especially having to play them on the road. I think that's going to be a really interesting matchup. That could be a lot of fun. Fayetteville is a much tougher place to play than people get it credit for, and I think Notre Dame could have some issues coming down to Fayetteville playing them at Arkansas's home stadium. Week 8, that's going to be the other week that I kind of really scheduled, where there's 4 or 5 games that I really thought could be big-time matchups. And this is October 18th, so kind of the middle of the season, towards the end. Texas Tech is playing at Arizona State that weekend. I think that's a game that could be a potential Big 12 championship kind of preview, or at least a game that's going to knock one of those two teams out of Big 12 contention. Texas Tech really hit the portal hard this year, finished 8-5 last season, but it's clear they're looking to kind of jump up and be a college football playoff contender. Arizona State obviously was in the college football playoff last season, so that matchup I think is going to be fun, going to be interesting. How Texas Tech will play is going to be fun to watch. That's going to be a good storyline for this upcoming season. Then, also in the Big 12, we got the Holy War. I love it. Utah at BYU. An underrated rivalry, honestly. But BYU beat Utah last season. Utah really had a tough year. Just dealt with a bunch of injuries, kind of had some bad luck. This is going to be a game I think they're going to come back looking for vengeance. It's always really competitive. It's always scrappy. And it could have Big 12 implications as well. I think Utah's really going to bounce back this season. BYU obviously had a strong year last year, and I think they're going to keep their momentum going. And then there's also a couple SEC games that weekend. Tennessee plays at Alabama. Depending on what happens with Tennessee and their quarterback situation, that could be a game that doesn't really mean anything, but I kind of doubt that. I think Tennessee will still be a decent team, just depending. Doesn't really matter who's under center for them. Ole Miss also plays Georgia. I'm not a huge believer in Ole Miss this season, but you never know if things kind of break their way. And then SMU plays at Clemson. I think that's going to be a really big game to key in on. Another ACC matchup where could be a potential ACC championship preview. Obviously, those two teams were both pretty solid last season, and I think that's going to be an interesting game. They're playing at Clemson, so could be tough for SMU. We'll see. Then rivalry week. Obviously, there's always a ton of good rivalry games. I think the one to kind of key in on this year is going to be Clemson, South Carolina. Clemson, I think, is going to be right on the cusp of a playoff bid, and South Carolina could be too. They kind of were at the end of the last season. That was a really interesting game last year. Lenore Sellers had like 160 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. It was kind of a crazy game last season. I think that's going to be another game where it could be a lot of fun this year, could have playoff implications. Those are just a few games. Obviously, that's going to change throughout the season, just as teams kind of fall or rise in the rankings, depending on how they're doing. We'll see. There could be some games that are nowhere on my radar right now that could end up being super marquee matchups. That's part of the fun of college football. You never really know. So we're going to take another short break. When we come back, we're going to close out talking about Lee Corso, his retirement from ESPN, what he's done for college football game day. We're going to talk a little bit about him, but we're going to take our last break of the show, and we'll be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Just to preview a couple teams this season, just talked about some of the top games for this upcoming season. Going to talk a little bit about the legend, Lee Corso, retiring from ESPN after 38 seasons at ESPN, started working there in 1987. Gonna make his final appearance on week 1, August 30th, 2025. Should be his last ever appearance for ESPN on College Game Day. This is something that's kind of been coming the past few years. You can kind of start to see the decline in Lee Corso, but it's a guy that was absolute legend, coach. Obviously, his big thing is doing the mascots, the headgear at the end of College Game Day, predicting games. He started doing that in 1996. Over his career, then he's made 430 headgear picks, and actually has been pretty successful. Been right about 67% of the time. I think that's pretty impressive, actually. 286 wins, 144 losses. Good for you, coach. That's a good percentage, especially when you consider some of the games. They're really toss-ups where he's predicting. Obviously it's normally the best game of the week. But so this is a guy that, has had a really long career, really renowned career. Obviously he was the head coach at Indiana University from 1973 to 82. Best year there was probably 1979. They went 8-4. They beat BYU in the Holiday Bowl. But then, just as soon as he joined College Game Day, really became known for his energy, his personality, his catchphrase, him saying, "Not so fast, my friend." Oh, that's so funny. And just obviously then the mascot headgear started with his first game. Actually, he picked Ohio State over Penn State. That was the first ever matchup, and he was right that day. Ohio State beat Penn State. I think it'd be really funny, really interesting, and it's probably going to end up happening, actually, is if game day is in Columbus again for week 1 for that Texas-Ohio State game. If his last pick is picking the Buckeyes, it'd be kind of poetic. Start with Ohio State, end with Ohio State. We'll see if that happens. But I don't know, be kind of a good storyline ending. So, but this was, there's been a ton of tributes pouring in all week. Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler, Reese Davis, they all kind of posted videos. Herbstreit called him a second father, kind of emphasized the uniqueness of Lee Corso. We're never going to have another Lee Corso, especially on game day. Just what he's kind of done, how he's made that show, his segments, his own. He's had a ton of memorable moments during his time. Excuse me, I'm sorry. But so I want to go over some of the moments too. 2009, he went riding with the Ducks, so that was when he put the Oregon Duck mascot on his head, and he started riding off in the motorcycle with the mascot. That was pretty funny, I'm not going to lie. 2019, this was only 4 or 5 years ago, he brought a live alligator onto the set of College Game Day, and he was holding it while he put on the Florida State Albert headgear, just kind of showcasing his, the flair, gotta love the theatrics. 2013, I remember this, he was dressed up as a Trojan with Herbstreit. They started having a sword fight. He dressed up as Benjamin Franklin one time. And then, the best was when they did the 400th headgear pick. They had a really, really beautiful tribute to him. He started crying. It just kind of showcased how much this meant to him, how much College Game Day has impacted Lee Corso, but the fans of all these respective schools, the people he worked with, his colleagues, Kirk Herbstreit, Reese Davis, just kind of the whole show, what College Game Day has meant to a lot of people, especially just you wake up, you turn it on at 9 Eastern, and that's what you watch before the slate of noon games. Is you wait, even if you're not watching the whole show, you're clicking on 15 minutes before because you want to see Lee Corso's picks, and also just the back and forths that he's had with guests throughout the years. Katy Perry, when she came to Ole Miss, his back and forth with her, just really entertaining character, unique persona, and a guy that's never going to be replaced, replicated. Just a legend of the broadcast industry, of coaching, of college football overall. This is going to be a guy that he will be missed greatly from ESPN, will be missed on college game day broadcasts. They're never going to be the same without Lee Corso. I kind of wonder if the headgear thing will ever continue to be a thing. Reese Davis actually shared an opinion. He said that it should kind of die with Lee Corso, should remain his and his only. I'm also kind of that opinion. I think this was the thing, that it was Lee Corso's and it was his unique way to call games, to pick games. That was Lee Corso's thing. I wouldn't even touch it. I wouldn't try to give it to somebody else. I would just leave it with Lee Corso. That's my opinion, though. We'll see what ESPN does. But true legend, absolute great, and he will be missed at ESPN greatly. I know I'm for sure going to miss seeing Lee Corso on Saturday mornings, picking whoever he thinks is going to win that day's marquee matchup. And that's going to be all for our show today on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please remember to subscribe and like the channel. And if you want, you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok for more sports updates, more content that you love. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to